Hello, how are you? We're going to talk more about moderation and mediation. And this video assumes that you have already watched the video on moderation and the video on mediation. So look at those first. So, you're saying, oh gosh, I'm watching this video now. Well, stop and stop the video, okay? And go and look at the moderation video, which is one video, and then the mediation video, which is another video. They're separate videos. And once you've watched those, then watch this one, okay? Now, this particular video I call the director's cut video, because what we do with the essence of regression is we talk about the essence of regression. The director's cut videos, and you'll notice these every now and then in the series of videos, actually go beyond the essence to some degree to give you a fuller understanding or appreciation of certain statistical concepts relevant for regression. So that's what this is. This is a director's cut version of moderation and mediation. And we're going to talk about them together. So here we go. When you think of moderation and mediation, I want you to first think about how they are similar. I want you to think about all the things that they have in common. Okay, so you and I now are going to think about those things. So go ahead, and while you're thinking about those things, I'll also be thinking about those things, but I won't only be thinking about those things, I'll be saying out loud what those things are in common that they have. Okay, I'll be saying it out loud. So here we go. Yeah, you notice I didn't say anything because they have nothing in common. Okay, so that's the first point I want to make about moderation and mediation. The only thing that they have in common is that they represent a poetic alliteration. Now, because it's like moderation and mediation. So if you're, like me, because I'm Irish, if you go back and do one of these ancestry tests, they say I got a lot of Irish in me. So I appreciate poetic alliterations, okay? So you can almost make a poem out of it, okay? Moderation, mediation, oh gosh, what an illustration. I don't know, okay? But the point is you can kind of put them together like that into a sentence, and you often see them put together in titles of art, like a title of an article, a title of a book, moderation, mediation, mediation, moderation. But that's the only thing they have in common, is that the sounds of their words. Otherwise, they represent different ideas about variables and the effect that variables have on other variables. Completely separate and distinct ideas about that. Now, after having said that, I'm going to take that back a little bit. They do have one commonality, and it's a very important commonality. Okay, so they're different conceptually, wholly different. And they're wholly different mathematically. But they do have one commonality, and it's a very important commonality. And that is they both represent inquiries into complexity. Inquiries into complexity. Adding further information as to the complexity that may be present regarding the effect of a variable on another variable. How that effect may be more complex than it first appears. And so for inquiries into complexity, and we love inquiries into complexity because we do want to have an accurate idea about how variables are affecting other variables. For inquiries into complexity, we talk about ideas of moderation and mediation. And just very quickly, By the way, it's a famous, if you know the world that I walk around in, I'll often say very quickly, and it's all like a relative idea because it's like a half an hour later I'm through with the very quickly thing, but I really do mean this very quickly. We live in a complex world, and that's not news to anybody watching this video, but we do. We live in a complex world, and we want to capture as much of that complexity as we can in our statistics and in our regression analyses. And so we do that through asking questions about complexity, which means questions about moderation and mediation. So, with that in mind, and that's the one thing they have in common, is they do represent inquiries into complexity about effects, about the effects of variables on other variables. So with that in mind, let's talk about moderation and mediation together. All right, so let's talk first about moderation. And you've watched those separate videos on moderation and mediation, so you already know basically what that is. But let's reintroduce it here for a moment. Okay, so for moderation, we start out with a particular effect that you might demonstrate in a particular study. And when we talk about that effect in research language, we might talk about the main effect of one variable on another variable. So let's say we're looking at the effect of job satisfaction on organizational commitment. Now I know I probably misspelled commitment there. I always do. I never know is it two M's or two T's or what is it, right? So anyway, so there you go. That's probably my misspelling of commitment, or abbreviation of commitment. But that is organizational commitment. That's what I mean to be saying there. And so we start out with this idea of this main effect of job satisfaction on organizational commitment. And let's say that we say that there's this, we find that there's this significant positive effect of job satisfaction on organizational commitment. And that's what we find in a particular study, okay? So, we can put it up here as a positive effect, all right? And we find this in a particular study, let's say. And what that's saying is that as job satisfaction increases, then that results in that affects organizational commitment. So organizational commitment increases as well, okay? And so when we talk about it as a main effect, we are saying that across all circumstances, all characteristics of people, across all different situations, we have this particular effect, positive effect, of job satisfaction on organizational commitment. So with increases in job satisfaction, it has this positive effect on organizational commitment, so we have an increase in organizational commitment. Okay, but first of all, we ask ourselves, how many effects in this complex world that we live in? As we're doing an inquiry into complexity. So you see me doing this. This is an inquiry. This is your code for an inquiry into complexity. How many effects do we see in the world that, of any sort of importance that we pay attention to and has this presence in our lives, these effects of variables and other variables, applies across every situation, okay? Across situations, circumstances, characteristics of people. It's basically the same, in this case, positive effect. Probably not, okay? Probably not. We probably have the presence of moderators that influence that effect. so that we find there's not just one effect of a variable on another variable, in this case of job satisfaction on organizational commitment, but we have multiple effects. We have a number of different effects depending on the status of other variables called moderators. Okay, now that gives us a more complex situation than just talking about one effect, in this case of job satisfaction on organizational commitment, across circumstances, situations, characteristics of people, etc. Now, that is often shown in the research literature. Because remember, I'm just talking about one study here, where you find this main effect, this effect of job satisfaction on organizational commitment. And that's one study with one particular sample. And it's not unusual at all to find that when you look across studies, you can get mixed results, okay? Now, I'm not saying that's true for the effect of job satisfaction on organizational commitment. I don't know. I just thought of those two variables like in the last, 5 to 10 minutes to use for you as an example. I haven't reviewed that literature. But it often is found that you'll find a particular effect in a study, but then as you look at further studies, you'll find that you get mixed results, and in some studies you don't get the effect. Or in some studies you get an effect, but it's much larger, or it's much smaller. So you get these mixed results. And what that indicates is not that, we're sloppy researchers or something, and we just can't, get our methods right or something like that. It does not mean that. What it means is that there are unmeasured variables that are present in the different samples that are influencing the results. So, for example, we may see mixed results across studies in terms of the effect of job satisfaction on organizational commitment. And in one sample, it may involve employees who are at on average, higher salary level. And in another study, it may involve a sample of employees who are on average, compared to the first study, the salary of those employees is at a lower level. Now that's unmeasured, let's say, but nonetheless it is a characteristic of the two samples, the sample of each of the two studies. And it may be influencing the results. And so the salary of the employees makes a difference in terms of the effect of job satisfaction on organizational commitment. Now we don't know, but that might be true. And that might bring order to some degree, because there might be some other moderators involved as well, and likely are. But to some degree, to bring order to our mixed results, if we start bringing into our analysis these unmeasured variables and we start to measure them. So let's do that and see what that looks like. Okay, now to do that, I'm going to need an eraser. So I'm going to look to my producers, who should have all this stuff set up for me, so when I'm on a roll, man, nothing kind of like, interferes with my groove. And yet, okay, here we go. Fantastic, I have an eraser. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're gonna just kind of get rid of this right here, because I need some room. And we're going to talk about moderation. And so now we're going to be looking at this effect. Go down here. We're going down even further. Okay. Of job satisfaction on organizational commitment. Here I go again, misspelling commitment. I would think of like an example that involves a construct that I can spell correctly. Okay, but I guess I don't know. Anyway, there you go. So here we return to this idea of this effect and exploring this effect of job satisfaction on organizational commitment. But now we want to see if it's more complex than what it looks like here is just this one effect that we have of job satisfaction on organizational commitment, and to see if we have an effect that is more complex than that. And like I said, this concern about whether we have the presence of moderators often comes about because we'll initially find this, and let's say it's a positive effect in one study of job satisfaction on organizational commitment, but then across studies we find different results or different effects, and sometimes no effect, and et cetera. Sometimes it's a lot bigger effect than we found here, a lot smaller effect. So then we start asking, well, what other variables may be influencing the effect? And when we ask that question, we're asking a question of moderation. So what is one of the unmeasured variables that may be present across studies that if we measure it, will start to bring some order to these mixed results that we're finding? In this case, this is across studies, mixed results. In this case, of the effect of job satisfaction on organizational commitment. And let's say that we are positing and we are testing the idea, the possibility, that one of these unmeasured variables might be salary of the employee. Okay, so now we have salary of the employee, so salary, and we draw an arrow like this. That's not the best R I've drawn, but anyway, so here we're testing the idea of salary as a moderator influencing the effect. You'll notice with arrows drawn, it's not drawn, to this variable or to this variable. It's drawn to the effect. So does salary as a possible moderator, so we're going to test it as a moderator, does it influence the effect? So it's drawn to the regression path here. Does salary influence the effect of job satisfaction on organizational commitment? And perhaps we test that, and when we test that, another way to put it, so we're testing salary as a moderator to see if it serves as a moderator of the effect of job satisfaction on organizational commitment. We're also talking about testing the job satisfaction by salary interaction as it concerns organizational commitment. So we talk about moderators. We're also talking about interaction effects. We're referring to the same thing. Okay, and so we do that, and perhaps we find this. Well, first of all, let's say that we find a significant job satisfaction by salary interaction. Well, that tells us something right off the bat, okay? That tells us that we do not just have one effect of job satisfaction on organizational commitment, but that in some way that effect depends on the salary of the employee. So the moment we get that significant interaction, what we know is we don't just have one effect of job satisfaction on organizational commitment, but that we have multiple effects, okay? Often we would talk about this in terms of three effects. We'd focus on a couple of them, but we're talking about more than one effect of job satisfaction on organizational commitment depending on the salary of the employee. So we know that we have more than one effect the moment we see the significant interaction, the significant job satisfaction by salary interaction. And when we further explore that interaction, which is best done, I think, by plotting the interaction, we may find something like this. A rather abbreviated plot here, but bring it up there a little bit. And you have to ask yourself, okay, well, what is your focal predictor, or the predictor that you're interested in, its effect on organizational commitment? And we already know what that is. That's job satisfaction. We're showing it right here, interested in its effect on organizational commitment. So job satisfaction is our focal predictor. So here we have job satisfaction. We're interested in its effect on organizational commitment. But we find out, because we have this significant job satisfaction by salary interaction, that we can't talk about just one effect of job satisfaction on organizational commitment, because we know it depends on the particular level of the moderator salary. And so here we have the moderator inside our graph here. And so that's salary. And we have, let's say, high salary employees. And then we have medium salary employees, but let's go right to low salary employees. So now we're talking about two effects that we're going to illustrate of job satisfaction on organizational commitment, depending on the salary level of the employees. So here we have low salary employees. And perhaps we find, it's going to kind of start cramming in here together, but I'll show it in kind of a shortened way. You see that video on moderation is kind of all shown in a better way here, I suppose, because things are more separated. They're a larger plot, but you'll get the basic idea. So we find that among high salary employees, the effect of job satisfaction on organizational commitment might actually be a small or non-existent effect. So perhaps it looks something like this. I'm trying to do that as a straight line. And you'll see there's a slight upward slope here, but it's probably, flat. Do a statistical analysis on that slope. And so that would indicate that we don't have an effect of job satisfaction on organizational commitment among high salary employees. Where we find the significant effect is with low salary employees, where perhaps it looks something like that and continues up here. It's running into this here now. But that slope may be found to be significantly different from zero. In fact, let's say that it is. And then what we're saying is that, well, we do have a significant effect of job satisfaction on organizational commitment, but only among low salary employees, not among high salary employees. So we have two effects, not just one effect of job satisfaction on organizational commitment. And so now we have learned more about the effect of job satisfaction on organizational commitment. We've added complexity to our understanding of that effect and to our understanding of how we were getting these mixed results across studies, because before we had the salary of the employees influencing the results, but it was unmeasured. Now it's being measured, the salary of the employees, high versus low. And so now we see the two different effects. Okay, one for high salary employees. I know I can get that cap off, and I'm going to get that more obvious here. Where we don't have an effect. We do not have an effect of job satisfaction on organizational commitment. Where you find the effect of job satisfaction on organizational commitment is among your low salary employees. That adds complexity to our understanding of the effect of job satisfaction on organizational commitment. You have to take the salary of the employee into account. And by the way, there are probably other moderators that are present too that influence the effect of job satisfaction on organizational commitment. So what we've done here is we've identified one particular moderator. And so you'll often see researchers on a search for moderators to understand in fuller and fuller ways the complexity of an effect, how it depends on the status of other moderator variables. Okay, so there we have moderation. And In my early days of thinking about the moderator, I'll tell you what I did to remember the idea of it well, is that I would think to myself. I wouldn't say it out loud because someone might correct me. And okay, I really don't need that. I mean, I just want to remember this idea of moderation and a moderator well. So I'd think it inside my head. It helped me, okay? And that is, in the early days, I would be thinking, so back in the day, it's like going, for me, that's not just last week, okay? I'd be thinking of the moderator variable as the depends on variable. But again, in my mind, I wouldn't say it out loud. See, out loud I go, oh yeah, the moderator. But to really get it conceptually, I have to be thinking in my head the depends on variable, okay? And then over time, I slowly phase that out inside my head in my thinking, and I'd actually start referring to it as the moderator. But for a while, I'd be thinking of it as the depends on variable, because what we're saying is that the effect of, in this case, job satisfaction on organizational commitment depends on the salary level of the employee. So don't be shy to do what you have to do in your mind to get it conceptually. And then, after a while, you kind of let the memory aid of the concept kind of go away there, and you're no longer thinking of it as the depends on variable, and you start thinking of it as the moderator. But get to that point. You don't have to start there. So that's the moderator variable, or in your mind, you can think of it as the depends on variable. Okay, so that is one way that we can inquire into added complexity of an effect. In this case, that an effect is moderated by other variables or depends on other variables, moderators. Okay, so we're going to take this out of here. Talk about mediation. My producer is whispering to me, do I want to make a second video? And the answer is no, I do not. I want to do it all in one video. And the reason for that, and it's to my producer's chagrin, he's going like this in the background. And so the reason for that is we've already done separate videos. We've done a separate video of moderation and of mediation. I'm now bringing them together. All right, this is the director's cut. This is for the true believers, man. So you're not limited by time. You're rolling with it. Now you want to hear about mediation, okay? This is director's cut. Other people who aren't interested in the director's cut, then they're not watching the director's cut. I'm going to put somewhere on the channel. The director's cut is kind of like a free flow Zen experience, okay? You just kind of keep going, man. There's no limits in us. We just keep moving with it, all right? Okay, so no, I'm going to continue is what I'm going to do. All right. So let's look at mediation. In some ways, I love mediation most. In some ways, compared to moderation. And the reason I say that is that, well, this is not the reason I say it, okay? I mean, this is true, but this is not the reason I say it. It represents a very different question or a very different inquiry into the complexity of effects. What has me love it, in a way, more than moderation, is that in asking this very different question about the complexity of effects, it's asking the question of the mechanism or the process of an effect. So it's not seeking to account for mixed results across studies because of unmeasured variables that may be present across studies. And so we need to identify moderators, like we talked about before. Here, that's not the case. Here, we have an effect of one variable on another variable, but we want to know more about the mechanism or the process of that effect. And in that way, we want to know more about the complexity of the effect. Maybe I'm just a mechanism process kind of guy, but I like that. I think that's really cool, okay? Let's know more fully about the mechanism, the process of the effect, and getting from this variable to affecting this variable. Okay, so let's say that we find this effect, and again, let's just look at it as this effect of one variable on another variable. And in this case, let's have that effect be the positiveness of the work environment on, you guessed it, the word I can't abbreviate correctly in terms of how I spell it, organizational commitment. At least I'm dedicated. I keep misspelling it the same way every time. So in that sense, I am reliable. I think it's a misspelling. Who knows? Maybe I'm spelling it correctly. Okay, so here we have this effect of positiveness of the work environment on organizational commitment, and perhaps we find a positive effect. Perhaps we find that as the positiveness of the work environment increases, it has this positive effect on organizational commitment. So organizational commitment increases. Okay, fair enough. Okay, but not good enough, right? Fair enough, but not good enough. So here we go back into, this is the code for you, inquiries into complexity. It has me feel like I want like a swirling thing like that, like we're going into, I don't know, some altered state of consciousness or something. No, don't do that, please. Okay, but we're doing this. Okay, we're doing this. We're having inquiries into complexity because we know something. We know something about the world we live in. And that is, there is a definite possibility that we don't just have what is being displayed here, okay, as this direct effect of the positiveness of the work environment on organizational commitment. Now, we may just have a direct effect. That could be the case. But we certainly are not going to stop there and just assume that, because again, we know we live in a complex world. And there may very well be variables, or a variable at least, that comes in between here in terms of the effect of positiveness of the work environment on organizational commitment. So the mechanism or the process of the effect of positiveness of the work environment, on organizational commitment may involve more than just this direct effect that is suggested here, but that we have variables that appear in between. When you look at a particular variable, it may appear in between, and then other researchers could look at additional variables. We could look perhaps at more than one variable that comes in between. But again, variables that come in between, and we can test for that. And we're interested in testing for that because we're interested in knowing fully what the effect is. We're interested in discovering that complexity if it is indeed present in the population. All right, so for doing that, we are asking questions of mediation. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and expand this out a little bit, because for asking questions of mediation, we need more room. So here, How do you like this? See, I had an eraser, but I'm now like doing it with my, I don't know, we'll do it this way, right? We need more room now for asking questions of mediation. So we're going to go over here now. So positiveness of the work environment and over here we have organizational commitment. But now we want to test for mediation. And so perhaps we ask the question, well, perhaps we have a positive effect of the positiveness of the work environment on organizational commitment. So that might be present. But in addition to that direct effect, or perhaps instead of it, we have a mediated effect that can also be referred to as an indirect effect of positiveness of the work environment on organizational commitment through a variable called a mediator. And so that's represented as this. And perhaps the mediator variable that we're interested in testing is job satisfaction. So, job satisfaction. Okay. And so now we're adding complexity to our understanding of the effect of positiveness of the work environment on organizational commitment, because we will ask the question, do we have a direct effect? But we're also asking the question, do we have a mediated effect or an indirect effect? In this case, through the mediator, job satisfaction. And we can test for that, okay? And perhaps we find that we have a significant test of mediation or a significant test of our indirect effect. And it looks like this, let's just say, that we have a positive effect of positiveness of the work environment on job satisfaction, so that as the work environment becomes a more positive place in which to work, then job satisfaction goes up. And that as job satisfaction goes up, we have this positive effect on organizational commitment. So organizational commitment goes up. Okay, and then we may find that now we have a non-significant direct effect. So what at first looked like a direct effect, just because we weren't testing for the indirect effect, now when we do test for the indirect effect or the mediated effect, perhaps our direct effect is no longer significant. Now, it could be that it continues to be significant, so we also have this significant positive direct effect of positiveness of the work environment on organizational commitment, so that as the work environment is a more positive place to work, then directly on organizational commitment goes up. So that could also be true, and then we would say we have both a mediated effect of positiveness of the work environment on organizational commitment through the mediator job satisfaction, as well as a direct effect. So whichever it is, this being a significant positive direct effect, let's go back to the idea of this being non-significant. We have now added complexity to our understanding of the effect of positiveness of the work environment on organizational commitment. And if it looks this way, then we would say, well, it doesn't look like we have, after all, okay, it doesn't look like we have a significant direct effect of positiveness of the work environment on organizational commitment, but instead the effect is indirect, a mediated effect or an indirect effect of positiveness of the work environment on organizational commitment through the mediator job satisfaction. Added complexity to our understanding of this effect of positiveness of the work environment on organizational commitment. In this case, by testing the question of mediation. Okay, as I said before regarding moderation, there is a way of thinking about mediation and specifically the mediator that again you can say to yourself inside your brain. So when you're talking with others, okay, you're saying, the mediator and mediation. But in your head early on as you're just trying to learn these concepts, I did this in my early days way long time ago. I think they were like dinosaurs, roaming, out on the plain during the day, that this would be true for me. I'd be thinking in my head of the mediator variable as the goes through variable. That is, we're talking about the indirect effect of positiveness of the work environment on organizational commitment going through job satisfaction. So it's the goes through variable, or the mediator. Second point, because this is the director's cut, and because I have mentors out there who, they probably won't be watching this video, but still I imagine they do, and I don't want them to be upset with me. So I feel the need to share this with you. There actually is a distinction. You've noticed that I've used the terms interchangeably, mediation and indirect effect. But actually, those terms are not interchangeable. If you're truly going to talk about mediation and a mediated effect, you need to be using a longitudinal research design, because this mechanism or process of effect that involves mediation and a mediator includes the operation or presence of time. And to assess that, you need a longitudinal design. So, much of the work we do is cross-sectional, right? We have, let's say a packet of measures and we just give it to people all at once. Well, there we don't have an element of time in our research design. So then we're really not testing for mediation. We're testing for an indirect effect. Okay. These ideas of indirect effect and mediation are often, in some people's views, unfortunately, talked about interchangeably, but there is that distinction, and I wanted to point it out to you. All right, so there you have the director's cut view of moderation and mediation, all in one video, despite the chagrin of the producers. Okay, but I'm the person up front, and so unless they're going to turn the camera off on me, I'm continuing, man. When it comes to the director's cut, we keep going. And the idea then of moderation and mediation as inquiries into complexity, which, as people who are interested about the effects of variables and other variables, about how phenomena in our world work, we want to always be making inquiries into further complexity. And we do so through questions of moderation and mediation. So thank you, Director's Cut. Hope you've gotten into it and enjoyed it. Have a good one.